Oh man. Oh, welcome back. This will be my third time trying to record this video. I've had some strange issues happen with recordings here, both with the audio and with OBS, so hopefully this time it goes a little bit better. So, this was my second build of the league. It was not my first, because even though it was the one that I would have liked to start with, I had absolutely no confidence that it was going to be reliable at all without having actual first-hand knowledge of the skill, which in this case we're going to be using Alchemist Mark. And Alchemist Mark was memed on immediately by the community. It did not look good to anybody. Very few people, I would say, had a positive reaction to Alchemist Mark. And there's a couple reasons for this here. Well, pretty much just everything about the skill just did not look good on immediate reaction, I would say. We're going to completely ignore the Flask charge generation because there's no way to scale this. It doesn't matter if you use Flask gained scaling, doesn't matter if you use curse scaling or mark scaling. Nobody is able to properly scale this. One charge every 3 seconds. No method of scaling this is going to get it beyond maybe 4 or 5 charges, maybe 6 charges every 3 seconds, which who cares? The only nice thing about it is that it's not 6 charges across the board, it's 6 charges for every slot. However, that negatively, that is the inverse basically of how the trader works. So it doesn't give us much benefit at all since we can't rely on it for utilizing Soul Ripper in this build. And, I mean, as a result, we pretty much just have to ignore it. But the more interesting part, but that was still memed on by the community, is the fact that the skill creates a pool of damage, whether you ignite or poison. And it will create one of these pools of either fire or chaos damage every second at most. And you can scale that by curse damage, mark damage, obviously the damage of the poison or the ignite. The kicker here is that it's snapshotting the damage of the strongest poison or the ignite at the time of its creation. The cool thing about this is that it gives us the ability to utilize things in the past really we weren't able to, honestly. I mean, not effectively. There's always been an issue with scaling faster ailment damage, and that is the faster your damage over time applied, especially in the case of like something like poison. Obviously, the faster it applied, the less time it was applied, and actually you could hit the server tick rate of, like, I can't remember, I think it's around 117 milliseconds, something like that, where if you exceeded that, then you actually didn't do any damage at all. One of the ways you could do this was with the replica rings for Ignite Ember Wakes. If you stacked them when they first came out, I don't know if it's still this way, but if you stacked them when they first came out, you would actually not deal any damage because they both have 90% reduced duration and they hit that threshold. But one of the nice things about this build is that that's exactly what we want to do. It doesn't matter how fast, it doesn't matter if we deal 0 damage with our actual Ignite or our Poison, because it's just being snapshotted. We're only utilizing that for the sake of snapshotting the damage. And so we can go ahead and accelerate it as much as we like. It's the one advantage of the skill. So that's what we're going to be doing, and in this case we're going to be focusing on poison. Yes, there will be some ignite damage as well, and yeah, it'll be, it won't be bad, the ignite damage, but we're not going to be reducing the enemies. We're not going to be reducing their fire resistance, which is the main problem with multi-damage methods. Usually the issue isn't with damage over time isn't scaling multiple damages over time. There's multiple ways of doing that. Like Perfect Agony is one of them. The problem is that you then have to deal with multiple resistances. And there's a couple items in the game that can help with that sort of thing, but when it comes specifically to elemental and non-elemental, that's a little trickier unless you can afford in your build to take something along the lines of, Black Flame, for instance, would be useful. But we're not doing any of that. We're not worrying about any of that. We're just going to be focusing on the poison damage, and any bonus fire damage we get is great. One of the nice things here is that they reworked the Apex Rage. I wouldn't even bother with this if Apex Rage did not get reworked. We need that additional 100% faster poison infliction, and the reason that we need that is because we're going to be using Vaal Flameblast. And what the goal here is we want to make the poison so fast that the last wave, the last stages of Vaal Flameblast will then have enough time pass between each stage to allow for the new stage to poison and get the bonus from low tolerance specifically. We're going to be utilizing low tolerance in combination with Apex and every form of reduced poison duration that we can get and faster damage application of poison that we can get. And once you get the threshold low enough, you can get it to the point that the individual stages of Vaal Flameblast will apply separate poisons. Now, you can only make a pool every 1 second, but the nice thing is that Vaal Flameblast actually lasts more than a second. So, yeah, you can. You can get multiple pools from a single Vaal Flameblast, and the first pool will be a little weak, and then the last pool will be kind of a monster. I have only imported the build into PoE to kind of show a little bit about it. I haven't done anything with the configuration, and even how it stands, you can see the damage here with my extremely unoptimized build at level 87 is quite damaging for a meme build, to be honest. It deletes all the hardest kinds of content. It rolls over. I haven't done uber endgame bosses, but everything else, it has gotten rid of. One of the things that I'll test it on here is fully juiced metamorph content, which is one of the hardest things you can do at the moment. In a map, my atlas is all of the hardest bossing juice that I can give it. Torment, like I said, metamorph, as well as altars, and just anything I can do to juice up the bosses. And this build just typically deletes them in tier 16. So that's the good part about it. The bad part is that its defenses suck as they currently are. Like I said, it's not very well optimized. Curses typically rely on temp chains and enfeeble is what curse bots usually are using to survive. And we do get to utilize enfeeble, but we do not get to utilize temp chains, because temp chains will increase the duration that the poison lasts. Well, not literally increase the duration, but increase the time that the poison is on the target, and as a result will mess up our goal here. Now, the other thing is that Vaal Flameblast is mechanically a skill from the past. It does not play very well in 2022. The best reason I can give for that is, well, it's really a problem of speed. The game is much faster than when the skill was implemented, and as a result, most skills today allow you to intercept your target with your skill. And the fact that you're intercepting the target is almost like a defensive layer of its own. Vaal Flameblast has a slight delay before it really gets going, and it also just has absolute. There's no projectile. There's no anything. It just everything comes and can swarm you, and if you're not on point, if you're not really focused, this isn't a relaxing build to play. You're not going to be strolling through. But I don't recommend using Vaal Flameblast to clear. And this is what I'm getting to. I definitely use a Bane setup like this in order to clear. But to get to how everything here works, I've got 2 open Flask slots because we're going to be using the Trader. The Trader gives you 4 charges per empty Flask slot every 5 seconds, and so if we have 2 of them, that's 8, and then if we have 100% Flask gain, that's 16, and if we're using a Flask with 32 charges or less, that is every 2 cycles. Yes, if you had just used it by itself, you would get 1 every cycle. That is completely unnecessary because we just don't need to. We don't need to spam it because the pools from Alchemist Mark last almost 10 seconds, and 2 cycles here is 10 seconds, and that's not accounting for the damage that the charges that you're going to get from just damaging bosses. If you're fighting a boss, it's not accounting for the charges that you're going to get from killing monsters, and it's also not accounting for the fact that we also take utility Flask gain 1 charge, which gets boosted up to 2 charges every 3 seconds. So, which is also gives a little bit of leeway on these things. I use 2 open because I like having the Quicksilver, and also I, without defensive layers, kind of need the Life Flask, to be honest, because I just haven't fixed the defense on the build yet. But anyways, so that's the setup. You're going to want to take this cluster here to get the 35% Flask gain here, as well as have at least 50% on your belt. I believe there's a belt called the Magnate, which is just as good as this belt and costs not very much. Certainly go that option. This was a failed attempt at making a better than the Magnate belt. But that is about 85%, and then we get another 20% up here by pairing Brood for Potency twice with our low tolerances. So that puts us over 100%. That gives us our charge generation that we need to get frequent charges. The Triumvirate Authority, I'm utilizing this. You could use a 6-link setup. There's pros and cons here. The pros of using Triumvirate Authority is that the 150% more damage that you get is just generic, which means that it boosts both the hit damage and the DOT damage, meaning that this is a juicy just hit the damage setup as well. I mean, it does massive damage just from the hits, as well as the 30% reduced soul gain prevention, which just makes the build feel a lot better. You're going to be getting more reliably your charges back just consistently in that 10-second time frame. And then the 60% increased AoE. And AoE is important on this build, and AoE is important because it's important enough that I have 2 corrupted Apeps here, both with AoE on it. So that gives us 90% increased AoE. And the reason for this is that everything on this build scales with AoE. Vaal Flameblast is something that gets smaller as it gets stronger. And you want to hit them with that last hit, but to do so, it has to be at its smallest size, meaning enemies chasing you, hitting them with potentially a non-amplified AoE character becomes very difficult. If you've ever used Vaal Flameblast without any AoE, you see just how small that last circle gets. Now, we also assist in this endeavor by using Divergent. Where is it at? Divergent Decoy Totem. The reason we're using Divergent is the one that gives it life regen, and it gives it 1% per quality, which is huge. If you are not invested in totems, you need to use Divergent Decoy Totem. Otherwise, they will not survive in endgame. With it, they'll survive but against anything that isn't an arch nemesis mob that has anything that kills life regen. There's a couple of them. Those are really the only cases where it dies. But that keeps this keeps them in place for you to hit them with that pool of poison damage, and they'll just sit there and take it. And it's another supplement to the lack of defensive layers on this character. Going back, the other important thing to note here is the Brutal Restraint. Now I'm using this seed 4570 if that's, you don't want to have to look up one on your own. And the reason I'm using this is it has 3 faster poison nodes. So poisons you inflict deal damage 10% faster, poisons you inflict 10% faster, and 10% faster, which is why I have if you were wondering why I have these weird things here, that's why. But they're still perfectly fine. I mean, they're all useful to us. This gives us cast speed and damage and fire resistance. That's fine. This gives us chaos resistance and reduced effective curses. And chaos resistance on this build also gives us chaos damage multiplier. So it works out. It's not bad. We're really going for the mark on this build that I've hit is 0.25. If we go over to Path of Building, 0.25 seconds. With all of the reductions I have, that's what it's down to, and that is fast enough for that last tick of damage to hit properly. If you're not using Yoke, I don't know how possible it is. I had to use a screen to GIF in order to get frame data in order to determine just how fast it had to be. And when I was at around 0.3 seconds, it wasn't reliable. But at 0.25, it's a lot better. And the problem with how the math works here is that the closer you get to 0, the harder it is to actually reduce the duration using faster poison damage. So it's pretty pitiful. But when you're getting like the implicit here on the ring, this 12% faster reduces about 0.01 off of the duration. So you go from 0.27 to 0.26. I mean, that's actually what how much it impacts. So, it's pretty rough getting it down there. And before the Apeps, if they didn't change Apeps to be how it is, we'd be out of luck. The other nice thing about Apeps, and the thing that we need to take into consideration here, is Eldritch Battery. You need to use Eldritch Battery with this build because Apeps has 40 mana loss on using a skill, and we're using 2 of them, which would be 80 mana per cast, which you might be able to make it work, honestly. This build doesn't have to cast a ton of skills. But why? It wouldn't be comfortable. This way, Eldritch Battery makes the lose 40 mana when you use a skill does not get converted to ES. You get to ignore it completely. So the downside of Apeps just completely goes away. And also, you just never have to worry about mana again because 20% ES regen by default is more than enough. You get everything you need, basically. A couple other things. We've got a Watcher. These are just so for your knowledge of where to get some of the faster infliction of ailment damage. A Watcher Eye with Malevolence is one. I get access to my 4th curse by using the Sublime Vision for Malevolence as well. This also gives you a little bit more damage on Malevolence, which is nice. And I've got a Careful Planning to help with dex problems and a Split Personality to help with strength and life problems. So that's pretty much everything as far as the build here. It's not very optimized, mind you. And like I said, it's only level 87. There's definitely some revisioning here. As a matter of fact, I have these stupid notes down. This is not a note you want to take, but it's more effective for what I'm doing currently in order to get the strength and dex here rather than at the large nodes. So anyways, that's how the setup looks. Real quick for how it looks to delete tier 16 metamorph. This is an example of a tier 16 juice metamorph. See the decoy totem goes down, he just sits in the pool and dies. And that's pretty typical, I would say. Obviously, metamorphs can get pretty crazy, so it's, they're not guaranteeing that there isn't some setup that just completely wrecks the totem and then proceeds to wreck you. That's certainly a possibility, but the only other thing I would say is that it's still possible to use the skill just fine, even if you don't hit the extremely low poison duration. And the reason for this is that you just reverse the order. Rather than marking and then flame blasting, you flame blast and then mark. You just time it a little bit. You're not going to get the last tick most of the time, but you don't need to. This is an extremely damaging build. And if everything dies just from the hit, who cares anyways? So it's good practice anyways just to do it in this order, honestly. I mean, if you, and the order I'm talking about is so you flame blast and then you mark towards the end of it. Mark is an extremely fast skill. This isn't hard to do. And that way that you know that the poison that you're going to get is one of the juicier poisons on the skill. That's all. I think that the damage potential here is much better. I see some other folks in the community doing things like doing the same thing, trying to use Impending Doom or Doom Blast and some other things that have decent scalers. Those damage scalers don't come close to Vaal Flameblast. And for the investment here, it's you get to solve all of the damage issue really just with one item. You don't have to worry about the 6 link. Like I said, you can probably make the 6 link work, and you could get the duration lower because you could use Swift Affliction. But they're, like I said, trade-offs. But anyways, let me know what you think. If you got any questions, if you want to see more footage, I know I didn't show a whole lot of it, but it's all really the same. It's all like that. Other than that, it's just going around and you get lots of juicy explosions on this build, obviously, because you're an occultist, which is nice. Bane is nice in general to use. It's a nice, fast way of taking out large groups of enemies. Like I said, though, it needs its defenses fixed because you don't want to be playing Path of Dodgy Boy in 2022. But anyways, again, thanks. I've got a couple more builds to post here. Check them out if you're interested in more builds like this. A couple of them, honestly, are more interesting than this. This really didn't have anything too mind-blowing as far as the meme value is. Really just wanted to, when I saw the new skill, I really wanted to utilize it because I had a couple, I'd done this sort of thing before, and so I had it on the back burner to try and make it good. But take it easy.